Radical love requires a radical faith. I know at the moment that just sounds like a phrase, a little bumper sticker that looks great and all, but ultimately it's a platitude that isn't really meaningful. But keep it in mind, we'll circle back. We live in a sick world, and it seems like it's getting worse. Our TV screens and movie scenes remind us how perverse sin has a habit of making things. And so we dress it up in verse and clothing and fashion and drugs and drink because somehow it occurs to us that this pain and this suffering is better kept hidden. Behind our walls of lies and deceit and corruption, we are the sinful interruption that gets in the way of God's restitution. Just take a second and think of celebrity culture. Marriage and divorce are like bike wheels and punctures. Deception is a given and adultery good gossip. And this is the culture that children grow up in? There are some shared disgusts, our safe dislikes. They're not countercultural, they're easy to fight. Protest for climate change, call them out on their lies. We are happy when we can judge evil through society's eyes. But what about those other causes? Those dangerous dislikes, where we're told you must be crazy to stand in defiance, where pride tears at our hearts like a pack of hungry lions, and we might not have the words so we choose to stay silent. I'm not talking politics, fashion, or climate. I mean loving our neighbor when they're locked in a prison. Caring for the homeless when even the decision to stick our own necks out might hurt our bank accounts. What do we do then? Stand for our faith in the heart of the lion's den? Shunned for no reason other than the fact that we loved anyway. But radical love requires a radical faith. Christ was radical. And not just in love. His faith and his desire for God was such that he trusted in him no matter the consequence. Knew that knowing God was of the utmost importance, because when it comes to loving in a radical way, we have to have a radical faith. And this isn't just a faith that the world has today, nominal and easy, costless and plain. Yes, I go to church almost every Sunday, but we stop being the church by the very next day. What if our rock star preachers on their stages carried that fire and zeal every day? And what if all of our overseas mission started right here in this very nation? We want to see the captives free and the rulers bowed down, but here we sit in our ivory towers. But maybe to see the change in a world out there, we need to start with some change in our churches right here. Picture the scene. Jesus the Nazarene, the radical teacher known throughout the land of Galilee, entered the temple where the moneylenders and thieves conducted their business in the house of God. And the following moments might seem a bit odd to those who think of Christ as a soft, gentle soul. But he fashions a whip, and out he drove those who used religion for their own selfish goals. But the Bible is brief on this moment of anger. Christ's passionate flame is like a coat on a hanger that we remember exists but don't wear too often for fear that we might fall out of love with its cotton. But the most radical thing about Christ that we see is him choosing to spend time with the least of these. The beggars, the broken, the sick, the diseased, without ears to hear or eyes to see, and he teaches the poor, he heals the lame, has dinner with the taxman who cheats without shame, and all the while the Sadducees and the Pharisees are saying, "Who is this man that he should ignore our fame?" Sorry, did I say fame? I meant faith. But isn't that often the case? We care more about popularity or the power we gain than making sure that we preach a gospel of grace. Our churches become coffins of gold top and side that look great and all, but they're just dead inside. And there are so many times when I want to be the kind of disciple who hangs with celebrities, the high status friends and the benefits it brings, perhaps a few photos for my Instagram feed. And if I had the choice between actor or alcoholic, I'm pretty sure I know who I'd rather spend my time with. But imagine the impact that one day could bring to a person who has learnt to live with nothing. To the famous, I would be very little more than 1 in a million strangers that adore. But to a poor man or woman, think of what I could provide. Money or food or even just my time, there's no better expression of Christ in my life. Don't get me wrong, knowing celebrities isn't a sin. There's no hidden 11th commandment, do not hang out with Will Smith. Jesus spent time with those who teach and lead. But it never distracted him from the one who was in need. Enter stage left, Mary Magdalene. Jesus was there in the middle of a meeting, and Mary comes in just to wipe his feet clean, and before you know it, she is the focus of Jesus' attention. It's funny how Luke even takes time to mention that this was a sinner, a woman dirty and hurt, and in the house of the Pharisee, Jesus spends time with her. You don't get a much more radical love than this story, and yet Jesus tops it at the heart of Gethsemane. Now picture the scene. Jesus in the garden praying for a last-minute escape plan, some kind of divine repeat of Isaac and Abraham, and before the sacrifice, God supplied the lamb. But Jesus knew that he was the man who was the substitution for the sinfulness that we all had, to take those nails in his wrists and feet so that our sin would hold him upon that tree. And in the garden, he wept and he cried and he sweat out his blood, because a radical faith comes from a radical love. And when the soldiers come by with our Judas's kiss, Christ could run away when Peter lopped off an ear, but he didn't just stay. He took the chance to heal. In the midst of the greatest rescue appeal, Jesus showed love because his faith was such that he knew he would do something bigger than run. The bitter pang of death would be overcome, so God the Father looks down upon his Son to hear those words, "Your will be done." I see so many Christians choose to give up. I just can't do it, or I'm not good enough, I'm just a human being, we say when faced with statistics. But from just a canvas, the painter makes something artistic. God parted the Red Sea with just a human being. He wiped out a city with trumpets and singing, slew giants by means of a boy with a sling. So when you start to question if you can do something big, get back to your Bibles and read what God did. Because often the big acts were done through small people. The outcasts and nobodies faced demons and evils, and each had their weaknesses. They were afraid and human, but led by a God who desired to work through them. And when the boy king faced a giant, he knows it's more the size of who you put your faith in than the size of your foe. In the UK alone, there are 20 suicides each day. That's 7,000 a year, and that's just the start of our pain. 5,000 men, women, children sleeping on streets or in destitute buildings. The world is in panic, and it's feeling the burden of staying at home lest it add to the problem. Families are hurting. Institutions are bitter. Lives are being lost, thrown away like their litter. And we can point fingers at governments as much as we want. But the church should be the body that's right at the forefront of solving the problem and loving the sinner. Hope, salvation, welcoming, loving, sincere. We should be the beacon of light in the midst of the darkness that lingered from night. We have the truth of joy beyond imagination, but we hide it away in case we damage our reputation. So then people seek solutions and things of this world. Drugs, sex, alcohol, rock and roll. Did you know we spend £35 billion of taxation each year trying to treat the problem of addiction? For the truth and the hope that Jesus Christ dying paid for, there are millions and millions of broken people crying. And for them and for us, Christ died on that cross. For radical faith leads to radical love. And it cuts me to my core to see the church fail to be everything it should be. Instead, it just sews back that veil. We play priests and Levites on the other side of the street, keeping ourselves clean but ignoring the ones in need. But to be radical in love, we must be radical in faith. To be a whole body that's wholly unashamed, to leap out of comfort zones, not knowing where we will land, because the matter of comfort is less important than the matter at hand. We need to love no matter the cost, and give no matter the loss, be present no matter the gloss of our ever-perfect shine that might be scratched away to reveal the sinfulness inside. We need to give up our illusions of being better than thou, and realize the truth is we're just as sinful right now. Do we have the faith to say your will be done? Even when we don't know how far we have to come, to let our hands be dirty and to go where most won't go, just to love our neighbour, and not just for the show. And yes, there will be obstacles. Christ never said it would be easy. It's a self-sacrificial kind of faith to carry our cross, still believing that our God has gone before us and is standing ever behind. The greatest love story ever told is that I am his and he is mine. So focus on your imperfections, but I'll focus on his promise. Focus on your hesitations, I'll focus on his plan for us. Focus on your anxieties, but I'll focus on his great peace. Focus on your infirmities, I'll focus on how he died for me. And radical love requires a radical faith. And all things are possible through God's awesome grace. So lay down your worries, for his yoke is easy. And keep loving your neighbors, for they need you to see it, that you are a child of the King of all kings. So go and be the church that the world needs to see. God's been teaching me so much recently about trusting in him even though I can't see the bigger picture, and it's terrifying. That even though my life might be falling apart at the seams, and I'm praying that prayer, God, if there's any other way, this doesn't feel fair. I'm learning at the same time to finish that song. Though I'm anxious, God, your will be done. I don't want to be the prodigal's brother, with my puffed up chest and my lack of love for another, making me jealous of his blessings because I feel entitled, when I should rejoice for his sake. No, the realization is vital that even when Paul, who saw his own burdens, trusted in God not knowing the outcome, and converted to faith from a life-hunting Christians, in that very moment all the saints up in heaven, who Paul had killed because they believed in Christ, even Stephen looked down with love in his eyes, rejoicing and praising that Paul had been saved. That is the kind of radical faith that I'm longing for in my life and yours. So I'm trusting in God that his will be done. Radical faith leads to radical love. And each of you watching is a beautiful creation of God, like the church, like your neighbor, who need you to trust in who God is and what he's done. And I know that it's scary, weighing up the cost. But we need to be Christ in the garden, to be Christ on the cross.